Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today I've got 5 buy low wide receivers post Week 5 action here and heading into Fantasy Football Week 6. Based off of their performances here in Week 5, I think that these players have the opportunity to be bought low for, and going forward the rest of this season should be key contributors to a lot of successful lineups out there because I think there's a lot more upside than what they put on display for us this past week. So, we're not going to waste too much more time before getting into today's video, but if you're new around here, make sure to click that subscribe button as we're making the push for 3K subs this week. And if each and every single one of you watching this video that hasn't done so already goes ahead and does that, I think we can reach that marker by the end of the week, and that would be an awesome achievement for the channel. So, thank you all so much for tuning into today's video. Let's hit the intro and get straight in to our first buy low wide receiver. Alrighty, so my first buy low option here for this week is T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. And my long-term projection from him not only spans from early on this year and what he did, but his production that he had last season and the breakouts and the strides that he made as a rookie. So T. Higgins in week 1 and 2 this season had a touchdown reception in some pretty productive games, but weeks 3 and 4 he missed due to injury. Here in week 5, he returns to the field, probably not quite 100% yet, but was able to get out there and play. One of the things I like to do with all fantasy players, and in particular running backs and wide receivers, is in their first game back from missing multiple weeks with an injury, I try to give them grace, and I try and give them a week-long grace period where I let them just get back on the field, shake the rust off, get the dirt off of them, and then moving forward after that is when I really start to manage my expectations based off of weekly injury reports. Usually guys aren't the same. They're not themselves their first game back. So that's not what I expected from T. Higgins here, but he looked quite good in that game. As a Packer fan, I watched every snap of Sunday's game. It was a wild one. I mean, Crosby and McPherson were missing field goal after field goal. I think there was like literally 5 missed field goals in that game, 2 from McPherson, 3 from Crosby. Tack on a missed extra point. It was terribly painful to watch, and as a Packer fan, it was driving me absolutely nuts. But besides the point, T. Higgins here. He had 5 receptions on 7 targets, but the 2 non-catches were blatant drops. And this goes back to players usually are not themselves their first week back after an injury. One of them was a beautiful comeback route. He ran it to perfection. He had his feet down in bounds. He was ready to toe drag, and the ball literally just slipped through his hands, and he couldn't quite haul in the catch. That is a perfect example of what tends to happen here. Maybe he's not 100% in his mental space because of that injury. And again, he's just trying to shake off the rust and the dust and get back into football action. I have no concerns with T. Higgins moving forward. I completely expect him to vault back into the wide receiver 2 position in this lineup and be a touchdown red zone scoring threat on a weekly basis. There's no question that Ja'Marr Chase has taken over this offense and has established himself as the wide receiver 1 for this football team. I think a lot of people penciled T in as that role for the 2021 season, but it's clearly Ja'Marr Chase's passing offense to lose right now. Him and Joe Burrow's connection is too strong to lose at this point in the year, but T. Higgins still has a very valuable role for this football team. Again, his situational awareness, his ability to make toe drag catches, win contested balls, and the great size and frame that he has inside the 20-yard line as a red zone scoring threat is a huge asset for fantasy football owners. So I look at T as a high upside flex play on a week-to-week basis. I no longer think that he's necessarily a pencil-in wide receiver 2 week over week, but there's certainly an element of upside here on a weekly basis because, again, he can score those touchdowns. He's an incredibly talented wide receiver. He's got a really complete game, and he should continue to trend up from here and continue to produce numbers like he did the first 2 weeks of this season. As attention goes more and more towards Ja'Marr Chase, teams will be game planning for him, focusing on that side of the field. That'll open things up for T. The talent will take over, and he'll be productive down the stretch of this season. Before I dive into my next buy low candidate at the wide receiver position for Week 6 action, I'm going to take a quick sec to run you all through one of the lineups I've made for tonight's Monday Night Football matchup on ThriveFantasy.com. New users on Thrive, when you use promo code SIZZLE, SIZZLE, will get a 100% instant deposit match bonus of up to $100 when you deposit 10 or more on their site. With my picks here, I've got Carson Wentz under 235.5 passing yards and under 23.5 total completions. You see there it says ice pick next to that second Wentz scenario. That means that's one of my tiebreaker picks if one of my first 10 scenarios don't play out properly. But I'll talk about that more in just a second here. Jonathan Taylor, I've got him building on his strong performance from last week with over 70.5 rushing yards and over half a rushing touchdown. And although I think Wentz will struggle, he won't have a ton of passing yards, won't be efficient, and have a bunch of completions. I think Pittman gets the job done with over 55.5 receiving yards, as he's been the most consistent pass-catching threat there. My other icebreaker pick, or my other tiebreaker pick rather, is Zach Pascal over 38.5 receiving yards, but the one I feel more confident about is Zach Pascal over half a receiving touchdown. He's been scoring touchdowns at a high clip considering how often he's using this offense. He tends to be more of a red zone target and a red zone presence than he is on any other spot in the field. Rodrigo Blankenship, the man, the myth, the legend, I've got him over 5.5 total points here. I think that the Colts are going to struggle to cash in for touchdowns, and they'll settle for some field goals in this matchup. Lamar Jackson over 268.5 passing and rushing yards combined. He'll get the job done on the ground and through the air in this matchup. Latavius Murray, I've got him over half a rushing touchdown. I think it's a safe bet that Latavius scores as he's the goal line presence for this offense. Hollywood Brown, over 56.5 receiving yards. Not too many points associated with this one, but I think it's a fairly safe pick. And then my last one here, Mark Andrews, over half a receiving touchdown. I think that the touchdown production is what Mark Andrews does best. He's been a little bit quiet in that area so far this season. I think he starts to trend upwards this week and cashes in for 6 with a receiving touchdown. You'll see my maximum point total at the bottom of the screen. Not super high this week, but I tried to go with picks I feel really comfortable with, as a lot of these situations were tough. But again, this is just one of the multiple lineups that I've made here for Monday night's action. One more time, guys, go check out Thrive Fantasy and use promo code SIZZLE. That's one more time, SIZZLE, for a deposit match bonus from $10 all the way up to $100 when you become a new user on the site. Something great to take advantage of. You can compete against me and take on those weekly over or under games. That's super fun to play. But Laviska Shenault is my next buy low wide receiver for this week. His usage and production from what I expected in week 5 was very underwhelming and not exactly what I had projected for him, obviously, as I had him as a must-start wide receiver last week. The thing that I think really impacted Laviska's game here was how dang good James Robinson in the ground game was. There wasn't so much of a need for short passing patterns to Laviska Shenault and to use him as a representation of the run game, because James Robinson was going out there and just power running and running through this Titans defense. Laviska is that player, though. When the run game is not being as effective as it usually is, you'll see the Jags turn to Laviska Shenault and throw him a bunch of passes in the flats, get him out in space, and try and create a run game through the short passing attack. That wasn't on display this week. That wasn't something they needed to do. And I think that going forward, that should be not so much the case, because they're not going to have that much success running the football on a week-over-week basis. But to me, what is incredibly encouraging about Laviska Shenault is that for a player who I saw is exclusively in this offense being a short and intermediate route running threat, he has added the element of the deep ball to his arsenal the last 2 weeks. He had 1 grab on 3 targets here, 58 yards. It was like magic. I mean, he has become a more dynamic player than I initially anticipated him being this season. Now, he's not out there with the best deep route runners in the league, obviously, but just showing that he can get the job done, and that Trevor Lawrence 2 weeks in a row now has given him a deep shot in a football game, is very encouraging to see, because on top of the short yardage work that he's going to be receiving, he may also now start to chunk on bigger yardage plays with that over-the-top vertical passing game. So Laviska Shenault, again, this goes back to last week, DJ Chark's injury on Thursday Night Football against the Bengals, opens up more volume in this offense to be had. And between him and Marvin Jones, both of which I think are very valuable wide receivers to have the rest of this fantasy season, there's going to be a great opportunity to snatch Laviska up for low, because, again, he only had that 1 catch. It did net him 58 yards, But going forward here, I expect that production to trend upwards, and especially in the volume department, because I think that it was an anomaly to see that low 3 target threshold. That's something I think will certainly improve week over week here. How about the rookie Devonta Smith? Now, Smith hasn't exactly tapped into a super high ceiling yet this fantasy season, but I think by the end of the year, he can be a very, very strong wide receiver to start. Jalen Hurts hasn't necessarily been the ideal prototype quarterback that's going to stand back there and be the most accurate player getting his wide receivers and his offensive weapons the football when they create separation and get open. But at the very least, he's a playmaker. He has gone out there and at least made this offense dynamic enough to a point where I'm going to continue to urge the Eagles to, I'm not going to have any say in the matter, obviously, but I'm going to beg them to run the ball more. You got to give your running backs more touches and make this offense more balanced. But Jalen Hurts has at least added a dual threat element with his own legs to this offense that keeps the defense honest to an extent here. Now, what I like about Devonta Smith going forward, despite not having the most accurate passing quarterback, despite not having the super high ceiling that we all might want him to have right now, is that he's got 6 or more targets in every game this season. This offense doesn't lock into him as the only passing target as they spread the ball out to Rager, Quez Watkins, Kenneth Gainwell get his looks out of the backfield. Obviously, Dallas Goedert's there. But he is clearly the top option in this offense, and it's not an extreme scenario like the Packers and Devontae Adams where literally every other pass goes his way, but it is valuable enough in itself to have the top passing target holder in an offense, and for a player as refined and as talented as Devonta Smith, he's going to continue to grow upon this. The connection with Jalen Hurts will build throughout the year, and I think that by late in the season, this could become a very strong connection in a fantasy situation that we're really fond of and produces great points for us on a week-to-week basis. So I think, again, I'm looking for sort of similar to a T. Higgins, a high upside wide receiver 2 ceiling for Devonta Smith this season. Only 1 touchdown in the first 5 games of the year. I think that marker will just continue to trend upwards here. Obviously, he's going to have a few more throughout the season. I don't see him being a double-digit touchdown reception guy at all, but he could certainly get close to that 7, 8, or 9 marker where you're looking at a really strong season. So Devonta Smith hasn't really had a crazy boom game yet this year, so I think there's still the opportunity to go out and buy somewhat low for the potential number 1 target in his passing offense. Henry Ruggs. This is a player who is probably more of a boom or bust play, but man, do I love the ceiling. He has been running past people every single game this year, and they just weren't able to dial up a deep ball against Chicago this week. Now, the Bears are a team that have traditionally, or not traditionally, but this season so far, the trend has been that they struggle against the deep ball. I think they were at least smart enough to get into a set where they weren't going to allow Henry Ruggs to fry them deep. Derek Carr got injured in this game. There was a multitude of things working against the Raiders' passing offense here, and they weren't able to, again, hit that deep strike in this game. Henry Ruggs, though, has been used a little bit more in a true and traditional number 1 wide receiver role this season. He's not just producing on fade passes. He's not just running posts and beating players deep. He is seeing a little bit more underneath work. He is seeing a little bit more intermediate passing work. That's encouraging. He is clearly, or his strength, I should say, is clearly the deep passing game. And again, when he hits those home run balls, that ceiling is going to be excellent. But this isn't a player that I'm expecting to be a super safe floor play to begin with here. This is just a player that I really like the talent and the upside he brings to the table. So if you can buy low on the Raiders' number 1 pass catching option aside from Darren Waller, I think it's worth doing so here. And again, that long-term ceiling, and as him and Derek Carr build their relationship together this season and continue to build chemistry, the upside is great for lineups. Ruggs is another player too, who I think that for the price that you're going to be asked of to go out and acquire him, that long-term upside for this Raiders passing offense, which has been downtrending the last 2 weeks, but was the number 1 passing offense in the league the first 3, could continue to get back to those numbers, and hopefully those first 3 weeks weren't just an anomaly and a fluke here, and they'll get back on track here in week 6. Calvin Ridley. So this is probably, well, for sure the most upper echelon name on the list for this week. Definitely going to be the steepest price you're going to have to pay here. But I still don't expect the price to be all that expensive or to be all that unworldly that you're not going to be able to go out and make an offer for him. Calvin Ridley's a player who didn't dress this week, didn't travel with his team to London to play the Jets. personal reasons. We're not really sure why. But he hasn't tapped into his wide receiver 4 finish ceiling that he had last year. He's been not really a different player. It's just that the deep balls, the big explosive plays, the connection with him and Matt Ryan on those type of plays just haven't been there. He's got 8 or more targets in every game this season. That's a great floor to be at. In the games he's played, he hasn't really had a bust performance. And in 3 out of those 4, he's had 10 or more targets. You're looking at a guy who's getting the same volume that he was seeing last year, maybe even better, and he happens to miss 1 week. And I think the Calvin Ridley owners might just be fed up. They might be hitting the panic button, and you might have yourself a real situation here where you can buy a wideout right now whose value is through the floor and go and potentially flip him for a top 12 wide receiver finish down the stretch of this season. Kyle Pitts had a breakout in that London game against the Jets. That is a only good sign for Calvin Ridley. It's not like Calvin's going to see a decline in his targets and in his offensive volume and work share because of Kyle Pitts' emergence. It's just going to take attention away from a guy who was producing wide receiver 4 overall numbers with Julio Jones on the field. So it almost goes back and makes it similar to last year's situation where you're not really facing double coverage or the team's top defender every single play of the game. So I think that'll play to Ridley's advantage here. The emergence of Cordell Patterson might be a third option that continues to lighten the attention that Ridley's seeing. And again, this is a player I believe in. If you've watched Falcons games, him and Matt Ryan have just been a step off. They just haven't quite converted. Penalties have wiped out some big plays for this combo. I really, truly believe in Calvin Ridley as a player, and I think that there's no reason he shouldn't get back to those productive games that we saw him have last year. And again, his floor has been excellent in the games he's played so far this season. He's just got to tap back into that ceiling. Alrighty, those were my 5 buy low wide receiver targets for week 6 fantasy football action. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to drop down and give it a like and click that subscribe button if you're new around here. Again, we're trying to make that push to 3K subs, and if all you do that, we should be on our way to achieving that marker this week or maybe the next if we can't quite get there here in week 6. But thank you all so much for watching today's episode. If you are new around here and haven't seen any of my content, go check out some of the other videos that I posted today. I've got my 5 buy low running backs in addition to my week 6 my week 6 waiver wire targets. So go out and add to your rosters this week to help you make that push in next week's game. So thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.